call to order the Newburgh Dundee Public Schools Board agenda for May 2024, a special session, and we'll start with the flag salute with Director DeHart. Okay, we're going to start with the reason we're all here tonight, the budget update. And I believe that Jackie Olson is going to be leading us in that process. So welcome, Jackie.
Is that better? All right. Well, thank you for having me. I am Jackie Olson. I'm the Executive Director for the Oregon Association of School Business Officials. I have been working in schools for about 15 years. I started as a small district where I was the entire business office. That's all right. And then I worked at an ESD for about 9 years. I did multiple budgets. I worked with multiple districts, and then before I taken this job. So I've seen a lot of budgets. I have been involved in some financial analysis. I was asked just this last week to come into Newburgh and assist with just taking a look and seeing what could be shared. And so I am today presenting you all of my results with about 10 to 12 hours of work on it. So I would say that this is a great start for us. It's not going to be the ending point, that there is work to do after this, but it gets you some information of where to go and start making some decisions. It's not working. Technology at its best. All right, so our plan for today is really, we're going to look at some of financial analysis, kind of look at some data to see how did we get here, review our financial data, and then I have some recommendations for the district in moving forward. So when there we go. So when I went through everything, I have focused solely on the general fund. I have not looked at any other funds within the district, but at this time for fiscal year 23-24, I am anticipating a negative fund balance of $3,773,365 if no changes are made. And I think that's important to understand, that there are things that you can do, but there is a critical timeline. You are at May 20th. And your fiscal year ends June 30th. I also want to talk a little bit about fund balance versus cash balance. So your fund balance, the district is on a modified accrual accounting basis, which means that revenue received for things like our property taxes, and things like that, or expenditures that are made, but the checks may not be actually out the door because invoices are delayed in getting to you and it takes time to process. And by the time they're mailed, the checks may not be sent even until August, even though they all happened in this fiscal year. And so with the modified accrual, we have money that is going in and out of the district all the way through August 31st that is still recognized back to June 30th. So when we talk about fund balance, we are including all of those revenue and expenditures that happen as part of fiscal year 23-24, but may actually occur after June 30th. A cash balance analysis has not yet been fully completed. We are working on that. A cash balance is really what is in your bank today. So if you even think about this with your own checking account, if you wrote a check and you mailed it off, or you put it in your purse and then you forget to drop it off at the post office and it sits there for a week, and then you decide to mail it, and then it goes to whatever company you sent it to, and you may, in your check register, you've already said you've expensed that money, but it doesn't actually come out of the bank until it actually is deposited and cleared. So the same thing. So the money that we are talking about at June 30, cash balance will be very different than what your fund balance is. Any questions on that? I want you to stop me at any time. This meeting is for you guys. And so if you have questions, make sure you ask them. All right, so a little bit about how we got here. We're going to look at enrollment. We're going to talk about some staffing. We are going to look at revenue and expenditures. Oops, next one, please. Thank you. So this slide, although it is very, very small, I just want you to look at the colors of line. Your orange line is your enrollment over time. Your blue line is your licensed staff. And so you can see that at multiple times throughout since 2012, your staffing has been higher than your enrollment has. 2012 was your baseline where they were basically equal. And so in 2020, there was an increase even though we were going down in enrollment. And that's when SIA was implemented. And so we had more money to hire additional staff. But at some point, we should see these kind of going in the same direction at the same rate.
Just to clarify,
Yep.
sorry for question. So where we're editing now, because it's such small print, we're the last vertical is 23.
Yes, so it's actual 22, 23
23,
data.
okay.
It does not have 23, 24 or where you're going for 24, 25. Because we're talking about just the general fund, I did want to highlight staff in the general fund. So this is all staff, licensed, classified, and administrative. And this shows you the last 2 years actual and the current year of where you are. And you can see that this year's staffing is higher than it has been in the last couple of years.
Sorry, quick question. I know this is, do we have any more historical data on this, or it's just, you're really just focusing on these last 2-3 years?
I'm really focusing on just the last couple of years. It really, we can look at more data, but really we're talking about what is the revenue that you have in the bank right now to pay for those staffing. And so we can look at historical data, but we still have to have the revenue to support those people. Any questions on that before we jump into revenue? All right, so when we look at revenue, there are multiple sources of revenue throughout the general fund. Your largest is the state school fund grant. You also have the local sources, which are mostly property taxes. Intermediate sources are the other source of revenue that you guys receive. And those are funds that are received from Willamette SD. And so they send you money and those are that intermediate source. And then you also have the beginning fund balance, which is savings from prior years. So the next slide, when we look at it, shows the top line for each of the categories is the current year plus projected, and then the purple and the dark green are the last 2 prior years. So you can see your overall state revenue has decreased. Your intermediate source, which is the funds from Willamette SD, has increased slightly, and your local sources of revenue are also projected to be a little bit higher, but that difference between local revenue and the loss of state funds are not equal. When we look at the fund balance, if no changes were made, this is your history of fund balances over the last few years and where you are projected to end in the negative if no changes are made.
Is that, sorry, is that
3773? Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
When we look at the general fund expenditures, we're going to look at different objects. And so objects are a code we use to really get into some of the details. We have salaries, benefits, contracted services, and supplies and materials are the 4 areas that we are going to look at. Your district is not abnormal. When we look at salaries and benefits combined are actually 83% of your total general fund budget. Contracted services only make up 13.5%, and supplies are that other little area over there off to the side. So when we talk about budgets and how to make reductions and save money, people always say, let's look at supplies. What do we got? And this slide is a great one to show you that you could cut all the supplies and it's still not going to make any difference. And those supplies are not only your pencils, but your cleaning supplies and things like that, things that you need to operate schools and keep students safe. In the purchase service areas or contracted service areas, there's three main areas that make up about 65% of your total expenditures there: transportation, substitutes, and utilities. Transportation has seen a significant growth this year in what we are projecting. Substitutes have gone up some. I expect it to go up a little bit more. It's fairly close, but nobody has that magic ball to say who's going to show up to work today and who may take a day off. And then utilities are also showing an increase this year compared to the last few years. This is going on statewide. I'm seeing lots of areas where utilities are increasing.
Question, since this is bar graphs, what is your total number for transportation between last year and this year? Or basically, or if I look at this paper, it shows we're negative 1.34 million in transportation vehicle operation services.
That number right there, 5.503.
503.
That is what we're projecting for your total transportation costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, so in the information shared with you was a separate financial report today. I am proposing that you use this financial report in moving forward because it has more information on one page and you can do some quick analysis on it. And I'd like to go through a little bit what this shows. So your first column is your 23-24 budget. Then the actual year to date is what was received through the 16th. Projected is everything we expect to receive through the end of the year. And then the total is the actual and projected combined. On the far right side, it also shows last year's budget and the actuals. There's more information on these spreadsheets that you guys don't see. It creates percentages based off of what was collected or expensed from the prior year and compares it to what is actually projected. So it gives you not only what's encumbered, for example, with expenditures, but what to expect all the way through the end of the fiscal year. And then the column in the middle is the over/under budget. So this one, oh, go ahead.
So I'm sorry, Clarity, you're saying the percentage columns are not shown in this paper or on the slide. Is that only for the actuals of 2023, or you're also saying that's also part of the 2024 projected as well?
We're looking at those for 23-24 as well, projected.
Are you able to share that spreadsheet with us, and especially the budget committee, the larger, grander with percentages? Because we have a meeting tomorrow night.
I am happy to share if the district is comfortable with that. It's one of those that you got to know the spreadsheet a little bit, so it may or may not make sense on those. And there's notes on why things may go up or down, but we can go over those. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this was the first part of the revenue page. And the top part of your report is all the state school funding pieces. So everything that's included in that formula revenue is in this first section. And you can see because May was the last payment you received for the state school fund, there's nothing else projected through the rest of the year. Your $28,993,678 is the amount of state school fund revenue that you have received. The next section of the revenue is other local sources. There's quite a bit of information in here. There's interest on earnings on investments, I should say, interest on taxes, recovery of prior year expenditures, excuse me, and even some miscellaneous revenue. That's often hard to project on what is going to come in, but that is what we're predicting at this time. The last couple of sections of the general fund revenue, the 2102, that is the support from Willamette ESD. That is a little bit higher than what was budgeted. In the other sources, I have highlighted the $700,000 here. This was the transfer in from the PERS special revenue fund that was a reserve account, and that was budgeted for 23-24. I have shown it as projected. That transfer has not been made yet, but if the transfer is not made, the $3.773 million that was listed in the first slide will increase by $700,000 to be closer to $4.5 million. So a quick summary of the general fund revenue. Overall, your revenue is down by almost $5 million. The largest chunk of that is part of the state school fund. The second page of that report is your general fund expenditures, and this has a lot more detailed information, which is why you guys got these reports separately. I know that these numbers are really small to read. And so the column in the middle that says the over under, anything that is over budget, I've highlighted in yellow. Part of that is that I want you to see that this isn't a one school problem. This isn't a one program problem. This is a district-wide problem. We are over expensing the budgeted funds in multiple areas. Instruction overall is over budget by $871,000 at this time. And that's if no changes are made. The second section of the report is all the support services, and your support services versus instruction. So instruction is everything that happens in a classroom. It's a direct instruction to students. Support services are everything else that goes into a child's education, including you as the board. You see that you have a line item on there as well. It includes transportation, fiscal, everything else that you can possibly imagine. Overall, your support services are over budget by $2.1 million. The last section of the expenditure report shows your other expenditures. One of the things that it has on there is both the operating contingency and the unappropriated fund balances. Those are not anticipated. We can't spend the unappropriated fund balance. We're not anticipating. We don't have the contingency put in there yet. If nothing else changes, that is where you are with expenditures totaling $63 million, budgeted at 65, but the $3.9 million or close to $4 million of operating contingency and unappropriated is part of that savings in there.
Right, maybe this slide does it. So based on that last slide, do we catch up here? You went too far. I don't I'll just go to this one. So the over under budget, are we saying we
So-
only have 2.8 left in
So
the
if you go to the next slide here, this shows it here, probably is what you're asking me.
Okay.
So you are over budget in instruction, you're over budget in support services. You can't spend the unappropriated. The contingency you could reassign and move it to someplace else with board authority, but because that hasn't been assigned, it's also put as it's not spent right now. It's not projected to be spent. So that's those two numbers there make up $4 million. 2.8 and the 1.1.
Okay, yeah, I think so. Thank you.
When I look at the overall revenue shortfall and your projected expenditures that you're under right now, that's where we were able to get to the 3.773 that is the negative ending fund balance at this time. The last page of your report that I provided to you tonight is the appropriations page. The appropriation is the authority that the board gives the district to spend money. And the appropriation levels are determined through the budget development process, and it's adopted by the board through the resolution. And this one page that I gave you, that is your legal responsibility as a board. I will always recommend that this is included as part of your financial report, because this is your responsibility. All the other numbers that you see added up don't mean anything. It comes down to this one page that I gave you. And so it's always important to look at what your actual appropriation level is, where you are on year-to-date expenditures, what your encumbrances are, where you're projected, and the last column gives you the over/under. If you are over in those categories, which we talked about of both instruction and support services, we should be identifying those early on. The other categories in special revenue, the PERS, debt, and the facility areas are not over budget at this time or anticipated to be over budget. Are there questions on the financial reports that I've provided? Okay, so recommendations that I would have at this point is the district needs to look at going out for a short-term loan. A tax anticipation note, a short-term loan, it basically is an influx of cash for a short period of time. It will have to be repaid by next December. I would also recommend implementing a hiring and spending freeze for the remainder of the year. The $3.773 million, I do not believe is viable as a reduction this year with only with 6 weeks left in the fiscal year. And so if there's any way to reduce it by even 2 million, that's a plus. If it's $1 million, you're still making reductions. Your short-term loan will be able to offset the actual, you'll reappropriate those dollars to meet the funding level, but it still would mean additional reductions next year. I also recommend, you guys are at a critical time right now where you are getting close to wrapping up your adopted budget. The board has a legal responsibility to have an adopted budget on or before June 30th. I do not believe that all the decisions for next year in making reductions will be able to be identified and worked through with the community, with your staff, putting all the options on the table. And so my recommendation would be that the board adopt the budget so that you can have a legal responsibility. You will have a lot of work to do through July and even probably August on what all those reductions will look like, but you can't wait past June 30th. If you were to get a short-term loan with your current projected budget to make that payment back. So my example here is if you received a $4 million short-term loan and you could reduce expenditures by $2 million, you have to still pay that back. You're going to carry forward $2 million, but your budgeted beginning fund balance for next year is $8.7 million. And if you only have $2 million of that saved, which would make it 2 million, you're short 6.7, and you still have to pay back the $4 million as well. So we're close to a $10.7 million reduction in next year's budget.
Can we, I'm sorry, are you done with this slide?
Yeah.
Is there any other options besides doing a short-term loan?
In this short amount of time, I don't believe so, not to make up that amount of money.
Yeah. And this is a question to everybody, and not maybe to you, maybe you do know. A few years ago, we were not in the proper credit rating to actually get a loan. So do we know if we're in the proper credit rating as a district to be able to get a loan? Does anybody have that answer? Yep.
I will say that Your district is not the only district in this situation right now across the state. I do know of a handful of others that have already applied for a short-term loan. There are a few others that are currently looking at it. And so your overall history with having a fund balance, I don't believe it will stop you from getting a loan this year for that short amount of time. Mhm. I have been asked in multiple situations about how do we even solve this? So some of your options on the table, and these are definitely not your only ones, but it's a way to start, are potential furlough days, reductions in staff, FTE, including licensed, classified, and administration, reviewing all non-staffing expenditures. But I also wanted to go back and highlight that slide that I showed you, that 83% of your entire budget is staffing and with salaries and benefits in there. The board also could look at your board policy. It does require a set amount, a percentage in there for contingency and unappropriated for your fund balance. An option could be to do a 1-year waiver on that. You would have to take board action on making that decision, and it would, but that is a potential for you. There's always lots of things on there, but I don't know your community well enough on what the best solution is for your district. Are there any questions at this time besides those that you've asked?
Yes, I'm curious if now is the time or not. Beginning of this, it said we're going to understand how we got here, and I guess I understand to the degree that we have more teachers than students, and that when you have that much staff, it causes problems. I guess I'm more curious about how we got here with the numbers that we've been having compared to all of a sudden this. I'm confused. I think I'm not alone. I don't know if there are answers or if this is the time or place, but this is bad. This is really not good. So any way that we can understand how we got so far off track would be great.
I don't know if I have all the answers for you tonight. I will say that I think it is a series of events. Your revenue definitely came in lower than anticipated. I think that's your key driver on here. I also think that there were expenditures made that were not budgeted, and the district has to come up with a better plan for moving forward on watching both the revenue and expenditures and showing the board what the actual projected fund balance is in a report that you can easily see and understand.
I have a question, and I understand this might not be our only interaction with you. Are you representing Heather and the DO at this moment going forward? Or is there, I'm just trying to understand your relationship and how we should work with you and or Heather or Dr. Phillips regarding getting answers to these questions we have.
You want me to answer? I was just asked to come in and do an analysis as a third party, neutral party, and provide information to you tonight. I have some capacity and happy to work with you guys a little bit moving forward. I know that I'm going to come to the budget committee meeting tomorrow evening to help answer any additional questions that I can. But Heather will continue to be your main person. I'm just here to support them and answer questions as I can.
Okay, thank you.
Can anyone help explain why such, what is it, almost a 4.8 million shortfall in budgeted revenue versus actual? We know how that's so far off.
I think it's just a combination of things. I think the lower enrollment
I think part of it has to do with how the state calculates where you're carried on a higher enrollment for 2 years. So when that high year drops off, it can really affect your state school fund, even if you didn't notice it the year before. So you have 2 years of decline that can hit you all at the same time. It was a bad estimate or what I anticipated our revenue being.
What, do you know what the estimated, what ASD average? ASD, that's weighted. ASD, isn't it? ADM. Was that you based it on the budget and then what our actual enrollment was? What's the delta there?
I don't have that number off the top of my head on what that ADM was built on. So I would have to go back and look and get back to you on that.
I guess on my question, I mean, I'm looking at this one sheet that has all the yellow on it. There's two things that are over $1 million, and how can we be so far off and not be aware of this before last board meeting? We have $1.3 million over budget on disability. There's programs for students with severe disabilities. And there were also 1.3 million over on vehicle operation services. I believe the last couple meetings we had, you said you guys are finding ways to save money, like we're going through the city, and now all of a sudden we're $1.3 million over budget. I don't understand that. That's conflict of messaging and where we're going and how far we've done so far. And it's mind blowing. And I would like, if you have an answer for that, great. If not, then that's an answer itself.
So the $1.3 million in the transportation is your contract for transportation services. I was under the impression this was encumbered for the entire year. I made that assumption and I was wrong. I shouldn't have made that assumption. I should have double checked to make sure that it was encumbered for the entire year. So when I looked at that number, I thought that was our annual expense, not realizing that we still had 2 months left to go and what we were paying out in it. So we will be reviewing all those transportation invoices because it is significantly more than what we had anticipated with the new contract that we signed this year. So we will be reviewing that with Bobby and seeing if there were errors on that or what happened to make the cost so much higher for this year.
Okay, maybe we can dive into more tomorrow, but that's good for now. So anything to note on the students with disabilities?
And the student with disabilities, a lot of that is contractor services. A lot of it is just based off of what your students need at the time. So these are your special education students, and when they have an IEP, you're obligated to provide those services identified in that IEP. You don't really have the option of saying, well, we can't afford to do that. So my guess is that we had a higher need for those services, but we'll also be reviewing those.
Part of it you're saying it was due to contractors, though. Didn't we know how many contractors were actually being paid in the hours and project that from September to October? I mean, that's the first couple months of the year. Can we have known how much that was costing us and if that was in line?
Contractors don't always work set hours. They're based on the need that the students have at any given time. So if your students have higher needs in 1 month or 2 months, or if they suddenly, you get an influx of students who have more needs starting after October or November, those costs stay up. So they're contracted and paid by the hour. And so we're kind of obligated to pay what they're billing us for.
Thank you.
Heather, is the 2310 Board of Education, does that incorporate our legal fees? Is that
Yes,
what
it
legal
does.
fees is?
Yes.
So that's our cost of litigation and any investigations that we've had to conduct or
Also any settlements.
and settlements.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Is that projected to change at all? Because I understand that we still haven't heard about one major suit and what the potential what the potential damage may be. And who's in course in charge of paying that? I mean, could this in 2 months, I mean, at that point, I guess it's maybe next year's numbers. But we probably haven't projected what that could be at all. And this is, I guess, is actuals. So never, I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking out of turn. So I think I answered myself. So.
Does anybody have any other questions for Jackie at this point? Given that she will be here tomorrow, it gives us some time to take these home and digest them and ponder and think about things. But if we don't have any more immediate board questions, it might be good time to wrap it up, but don't want to stop that.
I just want to follow up on, I asked for the detailed report with percentages and she's saying if it's approved. I don't know if Dr. Phillips, if you want to weigh in on that.
It's approved. If it's up to me, absolutely.
I'll get those revised and sent to Heather tonight.
Okay.
I would like to comment, though, that if we're going to share those with you, that maybe tomorrow we allow Jackie some time at the budget committee meeting so that we're reading the numbers correctly. So I just want to make sure going forward that everybody has a much easier time understanding what they're looking at.
Are you suggesting she just present that document to the budget committee tomorrow?
Is I would just think maybe we can set some time aside for her to, I mean, we may as well share it with the budget committee as well. But having that available is, if we're going to make it available, I think we need some explanation on how to read it.
Okay, so what I think you're saying is that we're asking Jackie to prepare the document, but then also present the document so that the board and the budget committee and the community understands what the document is telling us.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Heather, do I assume based on what we just learned tonight that we won't have a new budget for 24, 25 to review tomorrow?
I do have one. And so in talking with Jackie, we are going to present that with some of the corrections that were made, where wrong account numbers were, the missed allocation for tuition reimbursement has been added back into it. There's a few things in there. Again, because we have the fiscal responsibility to get a budget adopted, and then we can reduce spending as we go along and continue to work with the board. So yes, you will be getting one. It will look a little bit different than the last one we got, and I can email that out tonight as well. But yeah.
So, okay. So maybe I misheard. What I heard you saying is a new budget that you would send out tonight solely based on the things that were identified in the last budget meeting, or
Yes.
have we reduced the anticipated AD&W that we're basing the budget on also, and increase in costs that we're seeing here do business?
There are some of those items that have been included. The majority of those items have not been included, just to get it's kind of like the maximum budget authority that then the board will work with us to reduce spending and modify that budget to a lower amount as we go along.
One last thing, to just prepare tomorrow. I believe there was, and I know probably it's been very hectic for the last couple weeks, since our last budget meeting, but there were several asks from you. Are those going to be available tomorrow or not?
I believe that we have the majority of those ready.
So also in the packet was a new calendar. Did you want to go kind of talk about that? It looks like we've got a bunch of special board meetings. that in addition to the budget meetings too?
Yes. Yes, so this is basically setting time aside so that once a week we can sit down with the board to review any changes, to keep you guys in the know of what's going on as we move forward with the rest of this year and moving into what our final budget will be for next year. So it was a recommendation from Jackie that we plan at least one board meeting, and then if we don't need it that week, we can always cancel it. But just to increase the amount of communications and keeping the board in the know of what's going on and getting their feedback on potential cuts or changes to the budget.
Okay, so far, this is purely driven from the budget issue,
Yes,
the special meetings. Okay.
yes, all of these special meetings would be budget issue related.
Thank you.
Okay, are we, any further questions for tonight? Not, okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, Jackie.